French President Emmanuel Macron arrived in Algeria on Thursday for a three-day visit intended to smooth diplomatic tensions and recenter relationship marked by the charged history of France's colonial rule and the fierce war that led to Algerian independence in 1962. The visit is part of the political will of the two countries to promote bilateral relations and create a dynamic vision based on dedication and balance of interests. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune told a press conference with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron that Algeria and France had deep ties from memory to dialogue and technical coordination on international issues of mutual interest, adding that the visit would be a dedication to the new direction based on mutual partnership with trust and balance of interest. Issues like security, economic ties, and energy ranked high on the French president's agenda. But it's what he has to say about the country's colonial past that will likely draw the most attention. This is All 24 News special coverage. Hello there and welcome to the program. And before we bring in our guests, let's follow this report.
It is no longer a secret that the regional position and political weight that Algeria has now earned impose respect and an audible word on the regional and international levels. The nature of Algeria's relations with France are shifting to a different stage, as joint and pending files which are waiting to be decided on link Algeria with France, and these conditions allow Paris to build normal relations with Algeria. France's friendly visit allowed the two countries to set conditions for the next era of relations between the two nations. The meeting was an image of the equal-to-equal relations, especially when it comes to solving the memory issue, as they mandated a mixed commission to further study and conclude the painful chapter of history between Algeria and France. Although the visit that appears to be scheduled from the northern side, France has not reached a considerable result with regards to the files that Macron is required to tackle, most importantly energy, which brought the Élysée to plan ahead for what warms the next winter regarding the Russian gas crisis, as it showed an unprecedented need of Paris for the Algerian cooperation, mentioning that the global situation has shown how weak the European bloc in general, and France in particular, can be without Africa. Algeria's concerns expand to also include its regional environment, which is characterized by an unstable security situation in which the finger is pointed at Paris for being a prominent player in its instability, with emphasis on the Algerian role as a principal actor to solve this issue. Algeria is expecting the Élysée Palace to review its vision in the region and to stop dealing with the coastal countries as former colonies. The Élysée is now in a situation that if it wanted to characterize its relations with Algiers with a natural description that is dependent on full respect and to link economic relations with mutual benefit, and most importantly, for France to be aware of the diplomatic and political stature that Algeria has earned in its regional and continental surroundings.
And for further discussion, we are joined live via Skype by Mr. Abdenour Toumi, a Maghreb studies expert at OSAM and a journalist from France, along with Emmanuel Pouchelet, a geopolitical analyst from France as well. Gentlemen, thank you indeed for accepting to be with us. So let's start with you, Mr. Abdenour Toumi. Many considered the visit a French attempt to restore its relations with Algeria, which was recently shaken up. What are the real chances of restoring these relations through this visit, according to your perspective?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Yes. Can you hear?
Yes, it seems that we are having a technical sound problem.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Abdenour Toumi.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the visit of French President Macron this time came in a very, very special geopolitical context that is given a new, I would say, tone of the relations between the two countries that are, the media describe them as natural, some normal, but they are anything but normal and natural because of the high sensitivities between the leaders in both countries, and notably in the last, I would say, 2 years, particularly in the first term of President Macron, who did, implicitly or, to some extent for domestic political reasons, did inflame the story on the Algerian side. So, however, this time and this visit, France came in kind of shaky position, and we can see that on the body language of President Macron. He was very, very prudent, and he still, as if he works on eggs, and he knows any faux pas will cost him, highly price for the aim of this visit, which from our side, the Algerian side, we do understand, and we did to some extent get the code of the secret word is all about gas.
Nice indeed. And let's take it from there, Mr. Abdenour Toumi, and ask the question to Mr. Manuel Pouchelet. I saw you, I might be wrong, but I saw you here nodding to what our guest, Abdenour Toumi, was saying. So do you agree that the driving motive of Macron's visit to Algeria is really the energy crisis? What's behind his visit in general, according to your perspective, Mr. Manuel?
Yes, please. Thank you, sir, for your invitation. I can say
Pleasure.
that Mr. Macron is now doing his second mandate, which is now a new starting of his French policy, because we knew that the French elections had troubles with a new majority, and in fact, Mr. Macron's political party doesn't have the majority. Concerning the relationships with Algeria, I fully agree, of course, but it's time to start and to restart a new partnership, because, of course, the French foreign minister changed. So it means it has a new team, and even if the new strategy of France is mainly a focus on oil and gas, it has also another topic, an important topic concerning Algeria and the Algeria area. I am talking about Sahel and Mali, of course. We know that Algeria has become an important go-between with negotiation with Mali, and of course, I can say jihadists. But we know that in France is also seeking new partners, and strengthening links with Algeria is also a good way for France to deploy another strategy in Middle East, which is the other area where France is trying to find out solutions to.
And Mr. Abdenour Toumi, how do you find Manuel Pouchelet's statements? And can we agree that Algeria's selection from the Élysée as a destination for Macron at the beginning of his second term is a proof that, or a proof of importance that Paris attaches to strengthening its relations with Algeria as a strategic partner, seeing its weight and consideration? And to what extent does this visit mark the beginning of a new phase of bilateral relations built on a balance of interest and the promotion of economic cooperation between the two?
That's true, and the statements of your guest is, he's right on that. But let's be frank. We have been hearing this for decades, and I will take you back all the way to the real historical visit that a first French president who did visit Algeria after the independence of Valéry Giscard d'Estaing in 1975. And we know how symbolism was very high at that moment between the two leaders, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing and President Boumediene. And then in 1981, the visit of François Mitterrand, and we know the impact of François Mitterrand was a heavy weight in the dynamic of these two nations' relations. And then the visit of Jacques Chirac and so on. Now, when I hear about the new foreign affairs minister, and President Macron is starting his second term, and he will be looking forward to enhance the relations between the two countries. But again, let's be frank. I mean, here we are talking about very difficult moments between the two nations, and it is 60 years later after the independence, and there are some, complex issues that need to be taken care of. But the question is, do the French leaders, the political elite media, are willing to open a new page of Algeria and deal with Algeria as a partner, as I saw, it was in the reportage, based on mutual respect, and looking at Algeria and credible and serious partnership in order to weave with this country, strategic approachment or strategic relations, because it does make sense because of the history and also the demography, because we have more than 4 million Algerians live in France, and we see the ties between the two countries. Actually, it's very interesting. It was just yesterday an article in Journal Le Monde showing that 40% of the French, have some ties with Algeria. So, if we are sincere about these relations, it is the time, and indeed, it is the time to look for serious relations and close the page of the past and open a new page for the future. And as President Macron stated in his press conference, in joint press conference yesterday with President Tebboune, saying we do not build the past, we should look to the future. This is the time.
And speaking of the press conference, I invite you here to follow what the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, said, stressing that the talks allowed the evaluation of the achievement of the goals and objectives of the Algiers Declaration on Friendship and Cooperation between the two countries.
لقد كان هذا اللقاء فرصة.
The meeting was also an opportunity to discuss current security and political situations of common interest, both regionally and internationally. On one hand, we exchanged our points of view on many issues of importance to both countries, in particular the situation in Libya, Mali, and the Sahel and Western Sahara, which require joint efforts to consolidate stability in the region. Furthermore, agreed on the need to intensify consultation around the issues that are in the news around the international scene, generating new challenges that threaten the security and stability of our Mediterranean area and even international peace and security.
And here, Mr. Manuel Pouchelet, how, according to your perspective, is the quality of relations between Algeria and France affecting, either positively or negatively, the interest of the European bloc in general and France in particular, especially at the energy and security levels?
Yes, I think that today France and Algeria has to strengthen relations on a lot of topics, of course. It's time to change the French policy because Mr. Macron is inaugurating a new mandate. But what we can say also concerning Mr. Macron, he is deeply European in his strategy. So it means that he mixed France on Europe strategy with Algeria and of course with the Mediterranean Sea. But concerning the Mediterranean Sea strategy, it's an old topic which started with Mr. Sarkozy when he was French president in 2008, of course. But what we can say, we know that energy is the main topic of Mr. Macron's visit because we know that we have difficulties of understanding between Algeria and Spain, and maybe Mr. Macron will play the go-between on the honorable correspondent to try to warm the relation between the two countries. And we know also the big challenge which will deal with Italy too, with the new agreement between Algeria and Italy, which is a good help for Europe. But according to what I know also concerning the French and Algerian relations, it's time, as the reportage said, to have a new overview because today Africa and North Africa has become a territory of competition. I'm talking about the presence of Russia, United States, and of course Israel. So it means that for France, France would like to maintain, and it will be difficult for France to maintain and to come back in this area after the COVID-19 crisis, because the French policy was completely absent during this period. And I think, according to what I know about Mr. Macron's foreign policy, it's time to restart. But it also sounds what I heard from the American Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken. It is also a new start to reshape the foreign relation with Algeria.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Abdenour Toumi, talking about the security issue and cooperation at the Sahel region, we know that France was a major player actually in deteriorating the security situation by launching the war in Libya and actually now retrieving from Mali. How do you see the cooperation, future cooperation between Algeria and France in this particular area?
I think it is a must, and both countries have a big stake in the region. And again, this is another strategic mistake France did, and actually started with President Hollande, and President Macron just get trapped into that error, and he made again a strategic mistake, actually almost suicidal for France, that left kind of a power vacuum for other rising states and superpower to jump in. And here I am pointing out to Russia and eventually Turkey and China. Speaking about the American, they never left the regions. I mean, especially, because this one, it goes into the American imperatives of their war on terror. But now Algeria and France should, again, enhance their relation and have almost a common objectives on the threat that is, threatening their national security and interests. And here again, another interesting point that Algeria now can play on, or France needs Algeria to, get the lead on the issue of in the African Sahel, and notably in Mali, Burkina Faso, and eventually Chad. And we see the reconciliation process that is taking place in Mali, Burkina, and Chad, how Algeria is having, again, a strong word by bridging between the belligerents in those countries. And also there is another, I think, would be not, I don't know, but maybe it will be in one of these, again, discussion between the two leaders, is about the French journalist, Olivier Dubois, and Algeria. I think maybe France can ask Algeria to mediate and to release the journalist. So this is symbolic, but has a huge leverage in terms of cooperation, in terms of intelligence and security and political stability in the region. Otherwise, France will be, will lose its interest, and also it is already losing its credibility. And as we know, there is a huge French anti-sentiment in the African Sahel countries.
And speaking about France's interest, Mr. Abdenour Toumi, Macron appears not to have signed any important contract during this visit, and the French companies did not get really what they wanted. And President Tebboune, as it is obvious, did not make any economic concessions to French interests. And even experts confirmed that the French position here is on weak grounds. Even in Macron's own statements, Algeria today has a winning card, the economic card, that enables it to establish a new era of cooperation based on a win-win approach. Do you agree with this, Mr. Abdenour Toumi?
Yes, I do. And this is, again, it is making Algeria in a very, very strong position. And Algeria these days is in an unviable position because of its wise and smart foreign policy that was set by the tandem President Macron and his foreign affairs minister, Mr. Lamamra. So they knew now, both that established doctrine and the paradigm also, how diversify their partnership and to give them, again, some movements to negotiate with other regional and superpowers. And this is why today France, looks weak in comparison with just 5 years ago. So and also the position and the Algerian bold decisions in terms of strategic perspectives that has taken with the rapprochement with Turkey and Italy, and also the new policy of Algeria toward Africa. So this is why today France looks very weak, and as I said, this is why President Macron is very prudent in his statement, and also he is looking carefully at every word he will make in the next day.
Very
also.
nice indeed. And Mr. Manuel Pouchelet, the question that will really determine the post-visit is who really won this negotiation. It appears that the French president came out empty-handed from this visit. According to your perspective, how do you think this will have an echo with the extreme right in France?
So the extreme right party in France is a real problem today because they have a lot of representatives at the National Assembly. So we have to take into account that it has become a real political party with a lot of issues and challenges to carry out. But I think it's time, of course, as I know today, Mr. Macron's visit, a 3-day visit, is very long according to the diplomatic protocol, you know. And it's time to strengthen links with Algeria, because France can bring a lot of interesting solutions to Algeria concerning business. I'm not talking about oil and gas, but I'm maybe also talking about education, where France has a strong knowledge. But I think that today also Algeria will bring to France, and it will be, of course, a win-to-win partnership because the population of Algeria is very young. So it brings to France a new vision of future and a new vision of future of Africa, and of course how Europe could change, which is very important because of course Europe has a kind of border with only the Mediterranean Sea, which is very easy to cross. But what we can say concerning France on the political parties and representative of course, unfortunately, the far right, today, Mr. Macron at the National Assembly has a mosaic of the political parties in France, which are the most representative. And today, there is a warning sign to Mr. Macron's policy. I'm talking about internal policy and, of course, foreign policy. And it has a deep impact on the future of decisions, because we know that go back to school period in France would be very difficult, because we are talking about energy crisis, we are talking about inflation and other economic topics, and that's why Mr. Macron has a short time to visit Algeria, and maybe to find out solution, and maybe to have some answers to his question in Algeria, which is very important to underline today.
Very nice. And among the important issues as well is the subject of the common past memory of the two countries. The French president indicated that looking back into the past, no matter how painful it is, it shouldn't actually stop us from aspiring for the future of our youth, and revealed that the two parties mandated a mixed commission of historians in charge of opening archives linked to French colonization without any taboos.
This partnership will allow us to build strong ties and also integrate cooperation projects in the academic and scientific fields, as well as diplomacy, to make new common initiatives so as to open new agendas, to look at climate change and biodiversity. We have a common wealth, which is the Mediterranean Sea, and there is a diplomatic will which we express to safeguard this common field, as well as integrate the youth and encourage scientific research and develop the needed partnership in this field.
Mr. Abdenour Toumi, this is a recurrent question, really. What do you think President Macron has to offer to Algeria? Are we really going to see France making genuine and real initiative to resolve the issues between the two countries? At the top, the memory file, to which Algeria accords great importance, and which is also one of its top priorities. How can France clinch a win-win deal with Algeria amidst this diplomatic spat?
No, this is still one of the thorny issues that France will be dealing for a long time. And President Macron right now cannot afford such a delicate position and to make, again, a statement that will backfire at home, because as your guest stated, President Macron right now is having a a shaky parliamentary coalition, and the far right party is very strong now in the parliament. So to some extent, I think the idea of leaving this, again, sensitive and thorny issue for the experts to deal with, I think it's a good idea to, again, not let, politicians to capitalize on this, because in the end of the day, France, I don't think will make an apology. On the other hand, Algeria is very strong these days and should look forward to, again, disturb France on this issue, and never forget that move on from serious strategic relations that will open up or break through this, and one day we will see how this, again, how France will look at Algeria, because right now, again, unfortunately, French leaders and elite are still in the state of denial when it comes to Algeria.
Very nice indeed. And Mr. Manuel Pechelet, do you agree what France has done so far for pertaining to the Algeria's demands is judged not enough? And we know that Algerians actually are asking for the colonial archives and compensations for the victims of the nuclear test, and many horrible other crimes and atrocities committed by colonial France pose as a thorny file here. Do you think we can make progress toward solving these issues, Mr. Manuel Pechelet?
Yes, of course. I think that we will have progress, of course, because Mr. Macron is a new president and is very young. So he doesn't have any links with what happened in the past. But of course, even if Mr. Macron is respecting, of course, this history and this difficult history and, of course, the colonial period of France, the reopening of archive is an important symbol of an open spirit and to have this subject taken into account by the French authorities. But today, France is trying also, I fully agree what Mr. Toumi said, of course, but I think the young approach of Mr. Macron will solve and he will find out a lot of answers asked by the Algerian government, of course.
And Mr. Manuel Pechelet, if you've been following, do you think there are any economic files and projects that are going to be revived in the near future between the two countries?
Yes, maybe, of course, yes, because we know that France can propose technologies which could be a good help for Algerian development, of course. I'm talking about security matters because we know the situation in Sahel area, but also with French solutions, because the advantage of France that the economical field is very open. It's not strict like the one we can have only with industrial solutions like the one we have in Germany, for example. But concerning development, IT, of course, oil and gas technology, France could propose interesting solutions concerning Algerian development, where France have always keep an eye on it.
Very nice indeed. And in addition to security issues, Mr. Abdenour Toumi, we see that Algeria and France can actually constitute as strategic partners in order to safeguard the interest of the two countries when it comes to the region. And among the files discussed during this visit is the regional file, and it seems that President Macron is determined to cooperate in this file. So my question is, under which framework can the two countries cooperate effectively?
Actually, let's start with the Libyan dossier. I mean, both countries have, again, strong stakes in it. And again, France made a huge mistake and during the first term of President Macron by having very weak policy in Libya and in the Maghreb and in the entire MENA region. It was a fiasco. So this is the opportunity, because now Algeria is very strong and its say is there, and so they can get together to find, again, to break through the political impasse and security vacuum in Libya. So I will take to Tunisia as well. And also on the European aspect. I mean, maybe I don't see right now how President Macron could mediate in the aftermath of the Madrid diplomatic tensions, because it's very, very difficult for him to position himself on this issue. But maybe in secret diplomacy, I'm sure he can. France has also a credible and leverage to bring the two leaders together. And so that France could also have a clear position on Western Sahara dossier. So there are a lot of elements they can get together and put them together and bridge through toward the belligerent on the other side, because both countries now have, again, especially Algeria is in strong position because of its, again, the geopolitical context that is making Algeria in front seat, and France also because, I mean, don't forget, France is still, again, regional power and also a nuclear power, and it still has a say on the international stage. So absolutely. I think the two countries, they can work together, but the problem is all about politics.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdel Toumi. Mr. Manuel Pouchelet, thank you as well. It's been a pleasure having this discussion with you, but unfortunately, it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on All 24 News. With this, ladies and gentlemen, our special coverage comes to a close. You are watching the special coverage regarding the special visit of the French President Emmanuel Macron. Thank you so much, and bye for now.